Today on Rust Belt Airgun, I'm going to try to use one of these vintage Sears and Roebuck branded 12-gram CO2 cartridges to see if they still work. The vintage CO2 cartridge box does not disclose the year these CO2 cartridges were manufactured, nor do the individual cartridges divulge this information. I believe these vintage CO2 cartridges were manufactured on behalf of Sears and Roebuck by either Crosman or Daisy corporations. Sears and Roebuck made very little products of their own and branded other companies' products with their name. I believe that the CO2 power brand on the front was the Sears and Roebuck brand name for 12-gram power-led style CO2 cartridges. The tips of these vintage 12-gram CO2 cartridges look thicker than the newer style ones. As such, I will be installing this one in an older CO2 powered air rifle of roughly the same time period. My cousin gave me these vintage CO2 cartridges in 2001 as she was looking to get rid of things as she and her husband were moving from Ohio to Florida for a job opportunity. Only 1 out of 10 of these vintage CO2 cartridges was ever used. I'm not sure how old these CO2 cartridges are. I know that they are pre-1980 as that is the year my uncle died. I would be glad to hear from my followers if you know the approximate year these CO2 cartridges were manufactured. She also gave me my uncle's Crosman Model 166 repeater. The vintage CO2 cartridges were intended to be used with the Model 166. My cousin told me my uncle used to frighten the crows away from a small cornfield he planted next to their house. He would plink tin cans hanging from stakes next to the field. This would allow him to scare away the crows while getting some target practice in at the same time. I did a recent blog about my uncle's Crosman Model 166 and how it was still in working order. What better tribute to my late uncle and his vintage Model 166 than to try a vintage CO2 cartridge in it? In the manual, this is called to charge the rifle with CO2. Cock the hammer in first position to engage the safety. Unscrew the tube cap spacer assembly in the counterclockwise direction to remove. Place a drop of pellet gun oil on the tip of the CO2 cartridge. Insert the CO2 cartridge tip first into the tube. Replace the tube cap spacer assembly by screwing it clockwise onto the tube. Continue to tighten it until you hand tighten it as far as it could go, then unscrew counterclockwise an 1/8 turn. Decock the hammer when ready to fire. Cock hammer in first position to engage the safety. Slide the BB follower towards the muzzle and then lock in place in the notch. Insert up to 30 BBs into the BB loading port. Release the BB follower from the notch. A spring will force it towards the rear of the airgun. Decock the hammer when ready to fire. Let's see if this vintage CO2 cartridge will still work. In order to fire this airgun, you must pull the cocking lever down and then back up. This simultaneously loads the BB and cocks the hammer. Aim the airgun at the target and then pull the trigger. Well, I was able to get a total of 12 shots out of this vintage CO2 cartridge. You can see from the target view that shots 7 through 12 are getting less accurate with each shot due to the diminished CO2 left in the cartridge. My old Crosman Model 166 Didn't have any issues with piercing the tip of this vintage CO2 cartridge. I hope you enjoyed my video about using a vintage CO2 cartridge in my uncle's Craftsman Model 166 repeater. I'm amazed that these pre-1980 CO2 cartridges still work. Please like this post and subscribe to Rust Belt Airgun so that you're alerted to my future posts. Thank you.